This is an author's reading of One Dude's Guide to Being Bipolar. Alright, I'm reading Chapter 5 in the Oregon District in front of Toxic Brew Company because that's where the story takes place here. The first picture, though, keeping friends as a bipolar person can be challenging, but the real ones will stick around. That's what the caption is for this photo here. Chapter 5. Shut the fuck up, Donnie. Friendships and bipolar disorder. Remember that story from the last chapter about how I asked a friend to show up and take me home from Toxic Beer Company in Dayton when I was hammered? That's my buddy Jay. Jay has been friends with me since high school. We've been through a lot together, including getting arrested on Christmas Eve one time. Thankfully, we found Xenia's version of fellow Ohioan Ron Kuby to make sure the fascists didn't throw him in the slammer for too long. But say what you will about Jay, and you could say a lot of things about him. At least he shows up when you need him. Sure, maybe he doesn't always have the best ideas when I'm manic, perhaps, but he definitely is a ride or die friend who will always be there for you. Keeping these kinds of friends in your life as a bipolar person isn't always easy. Sometimes being friends with a bipolar person can end in a breakup. If you have a bipolar friend and you're reading this, you're already an amazing one. Doing your best to understand the illness and how it impacts your friend goes a long way with us, dude. Thank you. So, what does being a good friend to someone with bipolar look like? Let's dive into another story to discuss. Just some quick picture of Jay here. How many friends buy portraits of you from your ex and display their collection proudly on the wall of their dining room? As far as I know, Jay's the only one. My ex was an artist who did some portraits of me, and my buddy Jay bought, I think, all of them. So he's got the largest collection. As I write this, I've just ended a relationship with my poker group, which I belonged to for over 6 years, and I just participated in a mediation with 4 former friends to discuss their decision to remove me from a board we served on together. How do I get into situations like this? Well, there could be many reasons, but the bipolar certainly doesn't help. If I had to explain what happens from a 30,000-foot view, I would say that going manic can cause us to make poor decisions that often put unique strains on our relationships with our friends. Let's take the example of my poker buddies to illustrate what I mean. Last year, as I was planning to move to Bosnia, I decided that I had to let my poker buddies know that I was leaving. They expressed some sadness and then quickly moved on to finding my replacement. As bipolar people often do, however, I changed my plans. Like I've mentioned, I met someone, fell in love, and decided not to leave. I said as much to my friends via group chat, but the response wasn't what I had hoped. I didn't hear people say, "We're glad you're staying," and with my paranoia, I quickly started to worry that my spot had already been filled. A poorly worded text from a friend solidified in my mind the idea that I wasn't being invited back, and as a result, I lost it. I left the group chat and let my friend know I had hoped that they liked my replacement, not my finest hour. It took a lot of reassurance from my friends to let me know that they wanted me around for me to feel okay again, but one of my biggest fears is being abandoned. And I don't think I'm unique in that regard amongst bipolar people either. Being a good friend to a bipolar person includes making sure they don't feel that way. Now, unfortunately, the story doesn't end there. It actually ends almost a year later. In between those events, my friend, who hosted the poker club every month, had been asking the group members to pitch in and get a new table. I thought our table that we used was just fine, so I constantly pushed back. Others did too, but I was probably the most vocal. After backing down on the idea of purchasing a $1,000 table, he decided that we should buy a new $600 chair set instead, even going so far as to purchase it first and ask us to reimburse him later. I pushed back once again, but I happened to be somewhat manic and ended up doing so in a way that was, in hindsight, somewhat confrontational. He wasn't having it this time, and he got defensive and lashed out at me. Admittedly, it's a stupid argument that we both blew out of proportion, but as a mediator, I can tell you that it's almost never about the chairs or whatever else the argument is about on the surface. It's almost always about the decisions behind the actions we take that actually tend to upset us the most. If you don't have a bipolar friend, you may not know this, but we can be downright assholes when we're manic. So I let him have it. One toxic thing I do when I'm manic is I'll attack all your greatest insecurities if I think you've really wronged me. I hate that I do it. It's not me. But it also is me, when I'm manic at least. As of this writing, we haven't recovered from that, and I'm no longer in the poker league, so it goes. This is why, however, I try not to get into arguments with friends, or loved ones, or anyone really for that matter, when I'm manic. When you're manic, you're much more irritable and prone to anger. You're also not as good at critical thinking or self-censorship. Many times you say things that you might believe are true, but come out wrong. In other words, you may not be wrong, Walter, you're just a manic asshole. So hold off on sending that manifesto-length email to your boss or calling your mom and dad and telling them all the ways in which they have wronged you over the years, at least until you can calm down a little. Maybe you can say it differently to avoid ending a relationship. Maybe you don't even need to say anything at all. Just be cautious, dude. But honestly, I'm okay with how my relationship with the poker friend ended. I don't really regret what I said to him, and maybe I should, but at the end of the day, I don't need friends who are actively hostile towards me when I'm manic. And as they say, if you can't handle me at my worst, then you don't deserve me at my best. I wish I could spin it differently, but if you're bipolar, be prepared to lose some friends. It's going to happen. And if you want to keep them in your life, you're probably going to have to get good at apologizing. So either learn how to do that well, or learn how to make new friends, or learn to be happy with fewer of them, because it's an unfortunate reality of living with the illness. One way that I like to cope with being bipolar is telling people about it. I tell almost everyone, in fact. I even put it online and talk about it with my TikTok audience. I've also done storytelling events where I've shared about it, and I always tell my students that I'm bipolar. Why do I do such a scary thing, you ask? Because it helps destigmatize the illness. Some folks are truly terrified of bipolar people. There's so much misunderstanding and even more misconceptions about what the illness is and how it works out there that you'll have to forgive your family and friends for not being able to always separate fact from fiction sometimes. If they're actively trying to learn, that's great. Encourage it, because we need more understanding people in this world, period. Another reason I'm open about my diagnosis is that whole stigma thing. I can't tell you how many students and friends I've had over the years who have expressed thanks to me for talking openly about my disorder because it helps them feel empowered and realize that they're not alone in having a brain that works differently. It also helps them recognize that they can be successful in managing it as well. And I'm not saying that I'm always a shining example of what excellent self-managed care looks like 24/7, 365, but I do have a pretty good handle on it now, and even when I didn't, I still talked about it, because the more we normalize talking about mental health illnesses, the less fear we have of them. But I do have a pretty good handle on it now, and even when I didn't, I still talked about it, because the more we normalize talking about mental health illnesses, the less fear we have of them. We are fearful of what we don't understand, so the solution is more education. The more we educate ourselves and others, the more understanding we all become of one another. At least that's my theory of how talking about it works. But you should be prepared for some things to happen when you're open about your diagnosis. One unfortunate reality is that people will often dismiss things you say or feel and blame it on your bipolar disorder. It might be an idea that you have that they reject out of hand, or maybe it's a concern you have about their behavior towards you that they claim is warranted because of your mania or depression. Whatever they choose to blame on your disorder, it doesn't really matter. Don't ever let them use it as an excuse to humiliate you or treat you disrespectfully. You're not just bipolar sometimes, you're bipolar all of the time. Your mood is going to fluctuate, and they're going to have to learn how to deal with that. If they want to dismiss an idea you have or a concern you bring up because of your bipolar, ask them if it's okay to wait and talk about it at a later time when they feel, or you feel, you are in a better frame of mind. If they refuse to do this, I would recommend you hold off on discussing it further until you are both ready to discuss it after you're in a better place. If they can't handle that, then that's on them. But do be prepared for lots of excuses for others' behaviors to be blamed on you and how they think you might possibly react. It's fucking annoying, but it's a reality you'll likely experience forever. Another thing you should be prepared to do is to help your friends out too. Be there when they need someone to complain to about their spouse or job. Show up when they have that moving party because they can't afford movers. Bring along a ring or suitcase full of your dirty undies when your friend has to make a drop to help free a young trophy wife who has possibly been kidnapped. Just be as good of a friend as you possibly can, and the good ones will stick around and help you when you need it the most as well. What hurts more than the possibility of losing friends, though, is losing your significant other. So let's talk about that next.
This has been a production of Gem City Dudeist Priest, LLC. All rights reserved. To find other formats of this book, visit gemcitydudeistpriest.com/bipolardudeguide. You can find it on bookshelves at Barbara's Bookstore at 111 North State Street in Chicago, or locally at Star City Booksellers in Miamisburg. And if you'd like to donate to the author, you can via Venmo or Cash App at Gem City Dude. Thanks so much for listening, and abide, everyone.